Thank you, everybody, for joining us on our last session of Deep Sea Reef Chat on perceiving the deep sea on its own terms. We have three wonderful speakers with us today. We have Meghan Jones, who has a Bachelor of Fine Arts. She primarily works in acrylic on canvas and sometimes with graphite or colored pencils on paper. After a 20-year hiatus from painting, a chance connection with deep sea scientists in 2023 rekindled her love for all things science and prompted Meghan to begin a fine art career. Her work focuses on light, color, and texture in deep sea below 1,000 meters. Her modern impressionism painting style and research-based art combine to raise awareness and promote love for the deep ocean. We have Dr. Thom Linley, who is a curator of fishes at the Museum of New Zealand, the Tapa Tongarewa. I hope I'm saying that right. Moving after falling in love with New Zealand and the museum collection during his research into the Kermadec Trench. Thom specializes in deep sea demersal, which means living close to the bottom, fishes from 4,000 meters depth and deeper. He's particularly interested in their ecology and distribution and how they live down there. He also likes to explore different ways of communicating science to reach as many people as possible. He frequently gives public talks to offer a fun and accurate portrayal of the deep sea, and he is a co-host of the Deep Sea podcast as well. Brian Moore has worked at the Monterey Bay Aquarium since 2014, where he manages design, operation, and maintenance of the seawater and HVAC systems. Brian's connection to the deep sea was forged when he led the development of specialized life support systems to recreate deep sea water conditions in support of Into the Deep exhibition, involving years of research of trial and error. Many of the animals featured in this exhibition are collected from the submarine canyons offshore of Monterey. Thank you so much for everybody for joining us and being here. Without further ado, we have our speakers.
If you think of it in the right context, they're not too mysterious. A quick intro for me, really, but now involved in a lot of on your document, say anus, fine for a biologist. You've made crack up yourself. You've gotten away with the tree. Down to the fish, started working with specimens and sound. So I just wanted to give a little rundown of how we became aware of the deep sea and the theories that sort of propagated as we figured that out. So back in the day, we used to think the ocean basins were kind of just big bowls. Like you come away from the land, it would get deeper, 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 deeper. And then as you start to approach the land on the other side, it would just start to come up again. And the assumption was nothing could really live down there. There was even cool theories that things would eventually settle out, that they'd sink down to a sort of depth where they floated. So there were these ideas that there'd be a layer of shipwrecks and dead sailors and even cannonballs like floating around in the deep ocean once they found their equilibrium. And I just find that such a spooky visual. Unfortunately, the great marine biologist Edward Forbes is always remembered as saying that life would sort of disappear beyond a certain depth, and it's a shame, really, because it's the intro to everyone's sort of deep sea thesis. But he was a really good marine biologist, but he did do some work in the Mediterranean, which is particularly sort of poor in certain areas, and basically drew a graph showing that there's less and less and less animals, and then theorized that I think it was around 500 meters that life would stop, which is a big shame because he did some really other smart stuff, but he always gets remembered for that. So we didn't think anything was living down there. We thought it was a little bit too extreme. We were proven wrong when we started laying telegraph cables. So the transatlantic ones and some across the Mediterranean as well. And we started to realize that actually, no, it's not just this deep basin that gets deeper and deeper and deeper. There is bumps and hills and mountain ranges down there. And then when these cables failed or needed maintenance, we pulled them up and there was stuff living on them. And that sort of blew people's minds. So suddenly there was this realization that the deep ocean was a lot more complicated than we thought it was. And that led to the sort of big expeditions of the sort of 1800s right through into the 1950s. But back then, we just used to trawl. So things like the Challenger and the Galathea expeditions, these big expeditions were lowered by hand. And it's incredible that we were fishing down to sort of 8,000 meters by human power and taking hours and hours and hours. And if you read their actual records, most of it failed. Most of the time, it didn't work. But when it did bring stuff up, it was incredible. But you have to sort of perform forensics on it. You have this bag of meat, this bag of damaged specimens, and then you've got to figure out where they come from. So, oh, this one's got mud on it. It must be from the bottom. Look at the shape of the mouth on this one. Oh, this must live up in the water. But we didn't really know where they came from. The net would have caught things on the way down and the way up as well. And we end up with things like the Abyssobrotula galathea, which you'll quite often see as the record for the world's deepest fish at about 8,300 or something. But now that we know more about the species, that was probably caught in the water column on the way up or the way down. But it is still a record. That's some doubt thrown on that, but it is a genuine record. Then we got our eyes on the deep sea for the first time. We got cameras down there. This was what I sort of call the visual age. It started about in the 1960s with the monster camera, and that got these first few images of the deep sea. So this is the sort of classic abyssal frame, classic abyssal plane. This is what my research used to look like as well. You just put a piece of bait down with a time-lapse camera, and all these scavengers turn up. So that was actually the first time we saw the supergiant amphipod. We saw these scavenging rat tails. And that was sort of our first idea that it was quite a bustling environment down there. And then, of course, famously in 1969, Walsh and Picard were the first to see the Challenger deep. Although I will say, because of their bow wave, they caught a glimpse of it maybe a couple of seconds before they stirred up all the bottom and they couldn't see anything else. And Don Walsh famously thought he saw a flatfish swim away. We think that was probably a sea cucumber that was blasted away by the bow wave, but that was always his story. He wasn't backing down on that one. So we literally cast light on the deep for the first time. We saw these animals for the first time. And then in the modern age, things are incredible. We've got human-occupied vehicles, we've got ROVs with direct observations. We can go there and collect things and control things and sort of observe things in real time. And we've got these 4K cameras, we've got incredible floodlights, and we can live stream this to planets. So we're finally, well, we feel we're finally seeing it how it really is. And this is a bit of footage that we took when I was in Antarctica last year. Sometimes these are called Cheerio fish, like the cereal. So it's a type of eel pout, and they just tend to, when disturbed, curl up in a little ring like this. And as the new apex predator, the ROV, this makes things incredibly easy because that's a very easy fish to catch. But why is it doing it? That does not seem like a good survival strategy. But this is not how that animal usually lives. This is not how it usually avoids predators. So we'll come back to why it is doing this and why we need to bear that in mind when we're looking at the deep sea and trying to interpret what's. When we first got our eyes on things, we realized that a lot of things weren't as we imagined them. My favorite, oops, sorry, I will mute that. My favorite example is the barrel eye. So when we got the specimens, I think it was in the 1950s. So we knew about the species, but it was so the domed head is so fragile that we didn't actually know about that until it was seen in situ. And then you get this incredible domed cockpit. Those green lenses, those are the barrel eyes. That's the eyes. Some people see the nostrils as sort of eyes in the front, but those are the eyes, and they can swivel forward as well. And so we just didn't know about that. And then more recently, the Gigantactus anglerfish, we realize swims upside down, spends almost all of its life upside down, but that's the kind of specimen we were trying to interpret these animals from. So very badly damaged, still invaluable, still a lot we can learn from it, but seeing the animals in situ then revealed a lot more about how they're living their lives and what some of these structures were doing, why they were the way they were. Oh, that's skipping the video rather than moving on. There we go. And so I wanted to talk a little bit about the sensory world that these animals inhabit. As we know, when you get deeper, you are filtering out the light. You don't lose it all at once. You get filtered down to about the 450 nanometers, this blue-green color. And sort of about 200 meters onwards, where we say the deep sea really starts, you get about 1% of sunlight, but really variable with the sea conditions. And then beyond 1,000 meters, generally you're down to single photons, and it's really petering out. So that means that it's a very different environment for predator and prey. In the surface waters, say you've got a tuna chasing down a bait fish, that is a relationship that is happening over tens of meters. That is a powerful, fast animal chasing a smaller animal, dodging, weaving, blah, blah, blah. But in the deep sea, the interactions are at just a few centimeters. Things are sort of bumping into each other. You can't chase something down from 10 meters away because you can't see it. And so it's a very different game of hide and seek. A lot of these animals, almost most of them actually, making their own light, mixing luciferin and luciferase. There's a few different flavors of those. Some of them make it themselves. Some of them farm it from bacteria. And a little fun extra is that it actually comes from Lucifer. It comes from the light bringer, and that's how those chemicals got their name. This is actually a quote from the Three Body Problem, but I think it sums up the deep sea really well. So it described space basically as the dark forest. The dark forest hypothesis is that alien civilizations exist, but they're paranoid and silent. Spacefaring civilizations would view any other intelligent life as an inevitable threat and thus destroy any life that makes its presence known. In the dark forest, filled with armed hunters stalking through the trees like ghosts. And that is the deep sea environment for a lot of predator-prey interaction. And why do they have to be so sneaky? I'll just do this one first, actually. So in that lower light areas, very sensitive eyes can pick up the silhouette of organisms. And so a lot of them will counter illuminate and will actually try and break up their silhouette to make them disappear. Why do they have to be so sneaky? Because even moving reveals yourself. So this is a deep, low light camera being lowered into the deep sea. And this is what moving in the deep sea looks like to the animals. Everything you bump up against, even free bacteria in the water, will bioluminesce and will reveal yourself. So even moving is to give yourself away. And why are these things flashing? It's because there's always a bigger fish, basically. So this is a carcass we put down as bait. These are lots of eels feeding on it, but also little ostracods. So tiny little crustaceans are giving out all of this light as these eels feed. And the reason they are doing that turns up in a little bit. But these are tiny, tiny little seed shrimp producing all this light. And you can see a twinkling background as well. So that's sort of what is going on. And yeah, so they've rang and they've attracted a much bigger predator to scare off the eels and protect themselves. So when you're producing light and you're the observer, you control both sides of the relationship and you can actually manipulate what sort of perception is. The big can appear small, the small appear big, and you can pretend to be things that you're not. And so that's a really interesting visual environment. How am I doing for time? I've got a couple of examples, but I can stop hogging if we're tight on time.
We're good on time. I will mention that some people mentioned that the audio on your introduction cut off a little bit. So
Oh,
if you
okay.
wanted to summarize if something important at the end, that would be good. If not, that's okay.
Was it me introing just the bit about me or the first steps of the talk? Don't worry, I can recap at the end. I just had some fun examples of this kind of interaction. So I don't know if you can see that on the left. This is a little silhouette of one of those small bait fishes. So you're a fish or a larger predator looking up and you see a little silhouette of a fish and you think, I'm going to have that. And as you charge at it reveals itself to be the collar of a cookie cutter shark. So these have like a dark collar around their neck. And we think that predators charge at that. And then at the last moment, the cookie cutter does a little flip and uses the predator's own momentum to take a little scoop of flesh out of it. So you see lots of big predators with these little cookie cutter marks in them. And it's these nasty little things that are taking a chunk out of them by pretending to be a smaller bait fish. So here you see something little red and twinkly, nice little morsel, maybe one of those ostracods. But that is the tail lure of the pelican eel. So again, things pretending to be things that they're not. And I think one of the, oh no, here we go again. This is a big sort of glowing mass, a large glowing animal, but that's actually our little ostracod again, tiny, tiny little sea shrimp, but they can produce huge amounts of light to appear bigger and to almost tag anything that attacks them. So some of these actually produce sticky bioluminescence. So you actually make your predator glow and it can't get away from it, and in the hope that you bring in a predator to take it out for you. And I think one of the best mimics that obviously where a lot of evolution is working is a little glowing sort of strawberry squid, nice and tasty. But actually, it is the very specialized lure of the wolf trap anglerfish. So a lot of these light lures we see on the dragonfish and the anglerfish, they're definitely trying to be something. It's not just a fun shape. It is really deliberately trying to look like another animal. And then my personal favorite as the extreme of this is the sniper scope of the stoplight loose jaw, which actually produces red light. It has a filter on it. It's one of the few fish that can see in red light. And so it has a private sniper scope. It can see things without them seeing it. Um, so that's sort of how they interact. That's how they break the camouflage of other animals. So that was pretty much it. I just wanted to give a quick few examples and just sort of remind folk that when we do see these illuminated scenes, this is not how the animals are interacting. So to go back to that little eel pout, why does it curl up like a Cheerio? We're not entirely sure. It could be about reducing its body. There's nothing, it's taking up less space in the water. But if you think about that, when bumping up against things makes things twinkle, they probably look like a jelly. They probably look like a jellyfish when they curl their body up like that. And so that's not a very good meal. That tends to be stinging cells. So it seems like it's doing something very stupid when we're trying to catch it with the ROV, but that is not the sensory environment that animal usually inhabits. And so its usual strategy just isn't working here. So thanks a lot for having me on. If a few folk missed my intro, I don't quite know what happened there. Sorry about that. But yeah, I am a fish curator at the National Museum of New Zealand, Te Papa Tongarewa, and I also created and host the Deep Sea podcast. If you want any more deep sea accessibleness going on. So yeah, I think that's me.
Thank you so much, Tom. If anybody has questions, we will have some time at the end, or if you have some questions right now that are, present, also make sure to write them down in chat if you don't forget. But next we have Meghan.
I am here. I'm trying to figure out why I can't share the thing I want to share. Let's just see. We'll just open this up. We'll get this going. Let's see here.
I'm glad it's not just me.
Oh man, every time I have a
Yeah.
hard time. That's maybe the embarrassing part.
It's
But
because we're
I don't
using
know.
like Teams and Google and everything, and all of them do
Yeah.
it slightly differently. And you just
And
want to respond to
Absolutely.
this?
something's bound to go wrong no matter how much you prepare. It's okay.
Okay. Do we have a cutie patootie snailfish on our screens, friends?
We
Yes.
do.
Yeah, baby. I did it. Okay. Um, my name is Meghan Jones. As Frida mentioned, I am an artist and an author. I have a Bachelor of Fine Arts. I actually was 3 classes away from graduating with a drawing degree, and then I switched to the fiber department. I took 2 years of classes in a year and a half, which was really fun. My school allowed me to schedule classes at the same time, so I would run back and forth between lectures. And my graduating work was on a computer-driven loom. I was weaving on a computer-driven loom and Japanese wax-resist natural dyes. Neither of which I do anymore, but I bring it up because I can see this love of patterning follow through in my painting. My fiber degree led me into 12 years designing knitting patterns. And so I design knitting patterns for companies like Vogue Knitting Magazine. So I can also see that patterning coming through in my work. All right, let's talk about it. working with deep sea images. So I returned to painting in 2021 after about a 20-year break. And then I started working with deep sea images in 2023. And there's some challenges, right? So the challenges being it's dark. It's super dark. Only artificial lighting, no natural light. Any artist will tell you that they want natural light, that it's the best, that it's the most beautiful. You can only work from footage and photos, right? You can't go there, which means you cannot interact with or alter the environment in any way. If I feel like the octopus is being blocked by a hydrozoan, I can't just like walk up and move it, right? I have to deal with it. I have to figure out how I'm going to work around this thing that I don't like in my image. I can't ask a sub or ROV pilot for another angle, but like if you know one that I could ask, just let me know, okay? Let me know in the chat because I need to know that. That would be very handy for me. The varying quality of images, sometimes the images you get are like peak. They're so beautiful. They're super high quality. Sometimes they're really fuzzy and you have to make some very educated decisions about what you're going to use, how you're going to use it, that kind of thing. And then very dramatic lighting. And I'll talk about that because it's actually kind of my favorite. Let's see. So here's some examples of the wide variety of clarity and focus. So this giant grenadier, it's from the NOAA Seascape Alaska expedition. We've been working with this footage a lot with my collective, the Unseen Ocean Collective. And this photo is massive. It's huge. It's beautiful. It's so crystal clear. You can see every scale, every pore. You could probably see what he ate for lunch. Like it is that beautiful and big of an image. Same with the anemone. It's not quite as good, but it's pretty good. Those are both from NOAA. They have some super amazing high def cameras. The bottom image, I love. It's beautiful. I really want to work from it, but I'm going to have to take a different kind of tact with it because it's not as high quality. Professor Jameson sent me this one. It's from Antarctic, from I think 24, 25. So there's just a varying degree of things here with different levels of quality, different levels of color, different levels of clarity. And then this one on the side with the shrimp, this I just slurped off of a YouTube video, and I did create a painting out of this, but because of the constraints of this image, it changed the way that I painted it. So here we are. So I've had to evolve my perception and my creative process to work with some of these images because of these restraints, right? Because the deep sea, she keeps her secrets. So I've had to nurture a painting style that supports a spectrum of clarity. So just choosing a style that can work with really clear images or really not clear images. And that's been really important. Using Photoshop where necessary to compile images if it's not a composition that I like, if it doesn't have all of the organisms in it that I want, I use Photoshop to put them together, and then I paint from it. And sometimes I boost light and color, clarity, that kind of stuff. You have to be smart about what images you're going to choose for what size. So if I'm choosing a really large canvas, my most recent canvas was 36 by 48 inches. I had to start with a really high definition image. So you can't just kind of paint anything. I can't be taking a really terrible screenshot and trying to blow it up to that size because there's not enough information to work from. And then my personal favorite part of this is referencing art history to support these artistic choices and connect viewers, because when it comes to the deep sea, the vast majority of people haven't seen this imagery before. And so you're kind of trying to give them a touchstone in a way. You're trying to make it less abstract. And so I find in my practice, I really like using impressionism. Impressionism was a 19th century art movement. It is really concerned with light and color. And so these paintings are by Claude Monet. He's one of my favorite impressionists. And in his work, you can really see an art science crossover. Like it is absolutely present. He was painting the same areas of his world that he had chosen at different times of the day to observe the changes in light, in color, and in reflection. So this is, in my opinion, a very scientific way of approaching this, right? So on the left, you see the bridge over a pond of water lilies. He did 18 paintings in this series. The bottom, black and white, that's a photograph of the actual bridge. And then just here's 3 examples maybe morning, maybe afternoon, maybe evening. We're not sure. This was on his property, and so he had free access to it multiple times a day. Same with these haystacks. So he did 30 paintings in this series, and you can see all different things going on here. So the one in the middle, you can see, I'm just going to move all of your friendly faces to the other side so I can see. The one in the middle has snow. So you're seeing these very deep blue shadows in here and these white highlights because I think maybe dawn or dusk, you know, the sky is quite yellow. So we're seeing some really interesting color play. One at the top right, same haystacks, right? Summertime, we're seeing the grass. We're seeing some very long, soft shadows, probably also sunset or sunrise. The one in the bottom right, man, I'm betting between 10 and 2. Any way you slice it, right? We're seeing a hard shadow. We're seeing some very dramatic lights and darks. And so this is just one of the things that I'm really thinking about when I'm working with this imagery, because light is such a big deal in the deep sea. The other thing I really love about Impressionism are these visible brush strokes, right? And they give the impression of space and form. This is really handy when you start dealing with some of the teeny tiny things. Like we've been painting, we worked a lot with coral gardens in Seascape Alaska footage. And especially in some of that footage, it is packed with every little thing. And so working with these chunky forms, this impressionist idea, it enables you to put the idea of something in there without necessarily knowing what it is, because you can't go look at it and see exactly what it is. You can't DNA sample it, etc. Water lilies, I'm sure these are familiar to you. Same thing. He's painting them, 250 of them, BT dubs, multiple times of day. What he's really looking at here is the reflection of the light on the water. And so you're seeing the reflection of the sky, the reflection of the overhanging willows. I feel like in this upper right with the dark blue, you can really see the willow branches hanging down. And so he's looking at these reflections, and there are a lot of reflections in the deep sea imagery. It's not surface of water reflection, but it's reflection off of scales, it's reflection off of shells, it's reflection off of the bait, especially like the supergiants. They reflect a lot, and so they reflect each other, they reflect the bait, they reflect the lander, all of the stuff. And you're seeing all these different colors come in that aren't necessarily part of the rather boring animal. That, like, the boring color, amphipods are cool, but the colors are not very interesting. So, and I also really like how the form just sort of falls apart in these water lilies. So the bottom two, I mean, it is just the most basic impression of a possible water lily and mostly a bit of a scribble, but you still get the feeling that it could be there. And then, so these three, I included these to just show the breadth of ideas here. So the first one, the Gardenet Saint address, this has a lot more clarity. He's pulling a lot firmer form out of here. You're seeing the chairs, you're seeing the flagpoles. You really know what these things are. And so I do strive to have this level of clarity in my paintings, but not everything in my painting has this level of clarity. The middle one, it's much more, it's fallen apart. The imagery is breaking apart a little bit, but you can still feel like it's a garden, and you can still feel like those are bearded irises, and you could probably walk in there, but it's just these blobs of paint. And then the one on the right, the Houses of Parliament, he painted this off his balcony on a really foggy day. And it's so atmospheric, and it's so gentle, and it's so soft. And fascinating to me that he didn't go further. And there's this push and pull when I'm working where it's like, when is enough? Because you can always refine something into this super clear, this thing that's very clear with a ton of clarity. But I don't always want to do that. And so I think it's really important to not go all the way, because it leaves space for people to enter the work. Okay, so here's some of my work. So this is a painting I just finished, and it's called Garden of Venus. It's 36 by 48 inches. This has a combination of the very soft background brushstrokes in the soft sediment, right? Because a lot of the sediment in the deep is very soft. It allows it to sit at a different plane in the canvas. And then it has these very defined, clear, bright brushstrokes that have become a pattern. There's dots here. From close up, it almost becomes this disorganized jumble of shapes. And then from further away, you can see that it's Brazinghids and Venus flytrap anemones, which are one of my personal favorites. I love them all. Okay, next, this one's called the forest bather. This is a beautiful little rockfish. And this one has these very simplified shapes. And so like in the water lilies painting, you could see that they were very simplified blobs. And that's kind of what I'm working at here in the top left. So these are little, maybe cup corals, maybe hydrozoans, we're not sure. But this is a way that you can use this kind of style of simplification to represent these shapes and forms, even if you don't know what they are, even if the imagery isn't good enough to find out what they are. And then this part here where it's very, very dark and you're sort of pulling forms out of the background with different layers. Norman Rockwell, I'm not sure if you're familiar with him, but he did like the Saturday Evening Post, very classic Americana. He used to do a lot of that and he called it painting in the soup. And I just always think of it when I'm painting in the soup. Blobfish, not the blobfish you're looking for. This really absolutely leans into patterning. And then into storytelling as well. So including some of these details, like these dots that you see coming up out of the mouth and by the eye, you know, I mean, they could be sucker scars from an octopus. And one of my favorite things to do when I was taking kids to the gallery for field trips is talk about a possible murder and then talk about how the blobfish is here, but we don't see the octopus and he might have eaten him. And that gets them all like saucer-eyed and totally engaged. So we can use these details when we're representing these animals to, you know, invite people to imagine stories, and that just creates further engagement. And then lastly, talking a little bit about reflection and translucence as well. So the grenadier here, I was talking about the supergiants reflecting. Well, the grenadier as well, if you look right on his little jaw right here, you can see the mackerel is reflected right up on his jaw, that bright blue. And that the mackerel reflects just a ton. And then you can see sort of this green, this bright greeny yellow highlight on the bottom, and that's like the sea floor reflecting up, I think, I don't know. And then the snailfish here sort of looking through his translucent fins as well, where you can see the background come through and using this very soft background. And then the shadows, you know, making the shadows very, very soft. And then because we have this huge spectrum of very, very dark and very crispy white with these photographs, right? So it's huge contrast. How are we going to work with that? And there's actually an art technique that speaks to this. So how the deep sea demands how you deal with your shadows. I just set myself up for getting this slide. So I'm not going to go back. We're just talking about the shadows. If you look in here, you can see how dark it is at the back and how light it is at the front. So it's like this same, that's really high contrast. Okay, the art technique. We're here. Should have just skipped the other slide. It's called chiaroscuro. Okay, so chiaro means light, scuro means dark, and it's popularized by Da Vinci. You can see his painting here at the bottom. Leonardo da Vinci, Madonna with the Carnation. So he uses it here, but he doesn't use it as effectively as Caravaggio. Caravaggio is known for using this style. He would put it to incredibly dramatic effect. This is The Calling of St. Matthew. It's one of his most favorite paintings. And it's all about direct, intentional, dramatic light source, okay? They're very, very dark shadows, but they still have form and textural qualities. And so this is something that with this imagery that has the extreme lights and the extreme darks, really thinking about this when I'm creating work. And I think it's really valuable to think about it. This is an intense painting. This is another Caravaggio. And I apologize if anybody is very uncomfortable, but I feel like it's really, really important because it starts from this intense, total, complete black, and then he pulls this velvet out of it, right? And so this, also thinking about this when we're working with this really dark imagery from the deep. So here's some of my paintings. Also, super high contrast, The one on the left, Radiant Cornucopia, this one is from 2026. This is part of the Seascape Alaska collection. The one on the right-hand side is from a photo that Professor Jameson shared with me from Antarctica. So these are Antarctic grenadiers. And I was really, really fascinated with just how bright and blown out and overexposed they are on the highlights. It's just beautiful. And then just how dark, and then how many colors are in between, and how, some are brown and some are blue and some are green and there's purple and there's all kinds of stuff in there. This as well. So these also have this very, very dark background and sort of pulling out, painting in the soup, right? Bringing form out of the back, really, really crispy white highlights, and then working with all the colors in between. So this is that chiaroscuro idea. And yeah, I don't know. What else I got to say? Nothing else. What else I got? Okay, this is my book that's coming out if anyone's keen. It's coming out in the 1st of September. It's a journey from about just the continental shelf all the way down to the trenches. And what else? And then this is the little pluggy promo thing. This is my website. This is probably Instagram, this left QR code. And then the right QR code is the Unseen Ocean Collective.
Yes, and remember that after this, we always link back to accounts. So don't feel like if you're missing a link, it'll be recorded and shared later on as well. So if you're not in a place where you can take notes, that's okay. So we started with Dr. Thom Linley talking to us about, the research that he does or the things that he looks at in real life. And then Meghan walked us through this amazing, beautiful artistic journey and her interpretation and perceiving the deep sea. And now our next speaker is Brian Moore, who sees some of these things in real life.
Hi, everybody. Thank you, Frida. And yeah, thank you, Thom and Meghan. Those talks were awesome, super fun, interesting, beautiful imagery. Really enjoyed that. And I think I learned a lot too. But yeah, I didn't prepare a presentation for today, but just came prepared to talk about my connection to the deep sea, which is primarily through my work at Monterey Bay Aquarium. At the aquarium, we have an exhibit focused on the deep sea. It's called Into the Deep. It opened in 2022. And we spent the years leading up to that opening designing the life support systems that support those animals. And so the water in the deep sea, as I'm sure many of you know, is quite a bit different than the water at the surface. At Monterey Bay Aquarium, we do bring in water from Monterey Bay, close to the surface, about 50 feet below the surface. So we have to manipulate that water significantly to successfully hold deep sea animals in it. And so, yeah, I was going to talk a little bit about kind of the journey leading up to that opening and how we developed those systems. Please, if anybody has questions, you can interrupt me anytime and ask them, or if you want to hear more about something, please just ask. Yeah, so I'll talk about that. So, yeah, way back in 2016, there started being some whispers that we were going to open a deep sea exhibit. At that time, we called it Deep Sea 2020, which had a nice ring to it. And so my role, I was involved with design and life support systems at the aquarium. I had been there a couple of years at that point. And so we started working on how to make these life support systems. And so we did have some history with it. Back in roughly the year 2000, the aquarium had a deep sea exhibit. I think it was called Mysteries of the Deep. And we did have a low oxygen component to those systems, which was one of the real most significant differences between the water at the surface and the water in the deep. We knew that we were going to need to create low oxygen conditions. That water also needs to be low in pH. It needs to be cold. We had history with that. There were low oxygen systems way back in 2020. They worked by bubbling in nitrogen gas into the seawater to displace the oxygen in the seawater. And that works. You push the nitrogen in and it'll push the oxygen out, and you're left with very low oxygen water. But you're also left with a bunch of nitrogen bubbles in the water, which can actually be really harmful to certain types of animals. Some animals do fine with it, others not so much, especially jellies. The bubbles tend to get caught underneath their bells, and it can be damaging, and also to a lot of fish and other organisms. So our research way back then was primarily focused on developing low oxygen conditions without the nitrogen bubbles. And we started playing around with equipment called gas transfer membranes, and they're essentially cylinders with a bunch of little straws inside. They have a gas side and a liquid side, and we pump seawater through them on the liquid side. And the material of those straws is permeable to gas, but not to water. So the gas that's dissolved in the seawater can be moved in or out of that water depending on how you set up the membranes. And we set them up to remove oxygen from the seawater. So we started out with a little 17-gallon system up in our wet lab, and it was myself and my boss at the time and one colleague who were playing around, doing, trying different conditions and see what worked and measuring the oxygen in the water. And we found kind of right off the bat that, hey, these membranes are really effective. They're really good for moving gases in or out of the water. So from there, we just tried different settings, tweaking conditions, flows, pressures, types of gas to achieve our goal, which was low oxygen seawater that's also low in pH and also very cold to match those deep sea conditions. And we found that plumbing the membranes with nitrogen gas and connecting them to a vacuum source is what worked best. And so we create oxygen deficient, low pressure conditions on the gas side of the membranes. And that makes the oxygen in the seawater that's passing through them want to come out of solution, cross the membranes, and get exhausted out the vacuum pump. And we're left with very low oxygen water that it isn't enriched for nitrogen. And so we scaled up those systems. We built some holding systems, and then the husbandry team at the aquarium started holding animals in that water, and they found right away that they had much better success at holding them in that water than they did in oxygenated water or in the water that had the nitrogen bubbles in it. So that was super encouraging, and we continued to optimize the systems by playing around with different conditions. We built a system to go to sea. So we collaborate with MBARI, Monterey Bay Aquarium Research Institute, which is about 20 miles north of us in Moss Landing. And they do a ton of deep sea research. And we collaborate with them to collect animals for the exhibition. And so we built a system that could go on their ship so that the animals coming out of the ROV could go right in this conditioned water. And that worked really well. And then we scaled it all up and built the exhibit. So we've got about 13 exhibits, many of which have this low oxygen component. And so the same technology that we developed there in the wet lab, we scaled up to the big exhibit with hundreds of gallons in the systems, and really nicely, finely controlled and automated. And yeah, the exhibit opened in 2022. And yeah, it's been super fun to be able to show those animals to the public. And yeah, we're continuing to maintain and operate those systems. And yeah, so that's kind of my story there.
So, quick question for you, Brian.
Yeah.
Since I know Thom mentioned light and also Meghan, but in the sense of having these wonderful creatures above ground and people taking pictures with their camera flashes, what is how does that work with the deep sea creatures? Is there something that you guys have to think about when you're designing or making sure you're protecting those wonderful creatures from flashing people with their phones?
Yeah, light is super important. And, we attack that in a few different ways. The exhibit itself is super dark. So if you were to visit, it's really dark and there's just a little bit of light just so you can kind of find your way. For maintenance and things like that, we use red light because the animals are less sensitive to that because of how the light attenuates through the water column. And then flashing phones, we can't totally eliminate it, but we have lots of signs everywhere. We have, staff in the galleries reminding folks to not use the flash on their phones. So we really, really discourage people from using those flashes because you're right, it is damaging to them. Yeah. Yeah, another thing I'll jump in. Many folks, ask about pressure, and I think most of us are aware of the immense pressure that's present down there in the deep sea. One of the design decisions that we made early on in development of the show was to only feature animals that can acclimate to surface pressure. So that means we're featuring a lot of soft animals like jellies and siphonophores, and a lot of hard-shelled animals like crabs and other invertebrates, and then fish without swim bladders, so that they can acclimate up to surface level pressure. And so we do not manipulate pressure of the seawater in those exhibits or holding systems. That's one thing that we don't control for.
Well, also, presumably, you need to factor in the people who have to go in and clean the tanks, unless I'm mistaken and you don't do that.
That's a great point, and that was I'd say that was one of the challenges in designing the systems is they had to be serviceable, and we had to move the water between an exhibit and a reservoir where we do all this conditioning, and when water's moving, it tends to entrain air. And when you crack open a lid to clean exhibit or to feed an exhibit, that low oxygen seawater is like a sponge. Oxygen from the atmosphere just wants to dive in. Yeah, making systems that weren't just like a closed, loop, sterile loop, but were living systems that were maintained and serviced and cleaned and everything, was a big challenge. And really the way that we address that is that the oxygen stripping systems, as we call them, the equipment that removes that seawater is just like supercharged. That it can accommodate that oxygen that's crashing in from the environment and remove it quickly enough to maintain the conditions. So we turn over the water in these exhibits and holding systems, every few minutes, really, so that it's constantly getting that low oxygen treatment. So that we can, yeah, so that we can work on them, clean them, keep them nice, change animals out, feed them, and do everything we need to do.
Hi, I was wondering, it sounds like a proprietary like membrane technology. Are you working with other aquariums around the world to be able to install these type of exhibits?
Yeah, the technology is commercially available. They're called Liquicell membranes from 3M. So a big company makes them. They're used extensively in the beverage and pharmaceutical industries. They're super good at like creating like water without any oxygen in it for very clean processes and things like that. Or in the beverage industry, to carbonate a beverage or put gases into that liquid. And so we kind of adopted them from those industries. There are groups at other aquariums that have used them, and we've presented on this at aquarium conferences. We're happy to share with other aquariums about how we do this. We talk, one-on-one with people from other aquariums about not necessarily for deep sea, but there's other reasons that you might want to lower the oxygen of your water for different treatments that we do in aquariums. And so, yeah, that's one thing that's I've really loved about the aquarium industry. It's very collaborative. We all help one another out, and we're happy to share this technology. Um, there are other aquariums who use them for kind of the opposite purpose that we use them. When they're doing shark transports over long distances, they actually use them to keep oxygen in the water and to keep it oxygenated because they're highly efficient in that direction too, plumbing them with oxygen, and that actually goes into the seawater.
Cool, thanks.
Sure.
Thank you, Brian. If anybody has questions, let's go dive into it. And I see that we had some questions in the chat, and I believe this might be for Dr. Thom Linley, which says, which specific regions are covered in the deep sea research?
Oh, cool. I'm sorry. I just opened the chat. I'm sorry for cutting out. I'm not sure if it's a connection thing or my mic setup. So sorry about that. The deep sea is pretty global. There's a map. There's a way you can project the planet that just really shows that it is all one ocean. So if you're an animal that's adapted to 4,000 meters, which is kind of the average depth of the ocean, the world is yours. And it's always embarrassing when like I'll ID a shark off New Zealand and I'm like, oh, that's the Portuguese dogfish. And people are like, nah, nah, he doesn't know what he's talking about. It's like, no, sorry, it was found in Portugal, but it's global. So actually it covers a lot of the world. The really deep spots tend to be associated with the Ring of Fire, so the subduction trenches all tend to be in the Pacific. But there is example of the super deep hadal environment in all of the world's oceans. So yeah, the deep sea cares not for boundaries and is pretty global.
I also had a question for Megan. And just to remind people, if you don't want to unmute yourself and ask questions, I can always read for the chat. But Dr. Thom Linley showed us how like cool bioluminescence, and I love bioluminescence and talking about perception and perceiving the deep on its own terms. How would you paint bioluminescence? Oh, and there's also, if you ever go to the deep sea exhibit in Mbari, there is a little, I think, case, and you can tell me if I'm wrong, Brian. Well, you click a light and it shows you how some of the jellies like disappear. Because I think they shine red light and they just like go invisible.
Okay, so like you and I have a field trip planned there at some point. Yeah, we do. No kids. Not because we don't love kids, we love kids, but we just want to go, the two of us, so we can stay as long as we want and no one asks us for snacks. Okay, so got that out of the way. Let's talk about painting bioluminescence or translucence or reflections. You can't overthink it. You have to look at it as a shape, a chunk of a shape, and you paint exactly what's there. And it might surprise you. That color might surprise you, but it's really about breaking down the form into thinking about it like a coloring book, like a children's coloring book, and you have all your different chunky shapes that are stuck together. Ways that you can help your body do this, because that's going to use the left side of your brain, and your left side of your brain doesn't love to turn on because we use language and that uses our right side of the brain. And so ways you can do this that help you turn the image upside down. Okay, that's one thing. You're going to take it out of context. You're going to be able to see the shapes a lot better. Never ever speak to yourself when you're doing it. So you might find yourself, you're like, oh, now I'm going to draw the nose. The nose is freaking me out. I don't know if I'm going to draw the nose. As soon as you start saying those words, your right brain comes on and he's like, hey, baby. And the left brain shuts off. And so you have a harder time perceiving shapes, a harder time perceiving colors. And so really don't talk to anybody. Don't let your kids talk to you. Don't have a podcast on. Sorry, Tom, love you lots, but not when you're drawing. I know, look at him. He's so sad. I'm sorry, baby. I'm so sorry. But you got to have something that has no lyrics, because you want to keep that right brain shut off, left brain turned on, and it's just practice. And people that you see, like Carlos Hiller is a great example if you've ever seen him. That man can paint and draw anything, talking, dancing, swimming. People are all around, but he's practiced. Okay, so he's like really practiced keeping his left brain on while he does it. You can get there for sure. But when you're starting, just take it slow. Okay.
I'm curious about because of there's so many developments with robotics. Like, are there still going to be humans going into the deep sea, or is science kind of moving away from that? Just as someone who would love to do that someday, I don't know if there's like commercial, just for like lay people to go do that.
Can I answer that one? There are more deep subs than there ever have been. It's really, really coming online, and there are more opportunities for people not directly involved in science to get down. It's still like going to space. It's still pretty exclusive, but I think it's going to open up. If you want to get to sort of 200 to 1,000 meters, there are um, actually try to make a submersible that looks like a school bus. It has like 12 seats on either side. And I think that can go to like 200 meters or something like that. So the actual opportunity for people to go down is accelerating. It is really tricky. There's a whole extra suite of things when you're putting humans down there. And unfortunately, within living memory, we have our first big tragedy. No one in the community was surprised by that. That person had been warned a lot. And actually, it is still the safest form of travel, really. Um, but I think it occupies a separate opportunity. So when we interviewed a few people about the submarines, going down in person changes people. It is a great way of having an impact with the deep sea. Because again, when I was saying that, like, we're seeing things a little bit artificially, the idea that we take a picture and a picture is truth, actually that camera is based on our eyes. It's RGB, it's red, blue, green. It is a proxy for our eyes. And we're talking to Alan, talking to other people who've been down in person. There is a different layer when you're using your own hardware. And we don't realize how much our brain does and how much information our brain's getting by, say, where the focal point is on our eyes. There's loads more feedback than just an image. You get so much more from it, you engage so much more from it when you're using your own hardware, when you're looking at a little porthole and you're seeing it firsthand. So I think the subs, we're going to see more of it, and it changes people. It's really impactful. They're super, super expensive. And so from a science side of things, it's, would you like one sub dive or would you like 50 ROV dives? And there's just sort of that ability there. But I think they're really coming into their own. The Chinese submersible has recently come online. India has one coming online very soon. Obviously, there's Inkfish with the Triton submersible, and yeah, more and more stuff is coming online. So super exciting.
Cool, thank you.
Got a question for Brian. If since talking about looking at these things right now, our options are either ROVs or if we can visit maybe the Monterey Aquarium, and even that has its own perception, right? Because it's an aquarium setting and it has to look a certain way and be a certain way. But is there, if you could have, I don't know, if it, and you mentioned that not every creature can be brought up to the surface, right? So unfortunately, I will not be able to see an anglerfish out up here with me unless I go down there, if I understand that correctly. So I guess my question is, how do you see um, within the aquarium and the exhibits, how is it that these deep sea creatures can or have changed maybe the way that the visitors maybe look towards it, or maybe if you know a little bit of like maybe if it has changed some people's idea of it, because I feel like there's this feeling that the deep sea is big, dark, and scary, which I'm pretty sure many of us here would would say, but so many cool things too. So since you have, um, some of the creatures in person in front of you, I was curious.
Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah, it's not my, area of expertise, but I do have, thoughts about it. I think that the deep sea for a lot of people is it's hard to picture, it's so foreign and so far away that it's kind of just really removed from our everyday lives. So I think showing people the actual animals and people getting to see them, move around and interact with one another, shows people that they can sort of relate to them. These are animals with lives that have strategies and things that they need to do. And a lot of them, are beautiful, and a lot of the jellies and different animals, they're just really pleasant to look at. A lot of them are super interesting to look at, the different invertebrates. Yeah, I think we can show like the diversity of habitat down there. We have a hydrothermal vent display that are, really oases for life. And so, and then a lot of them are super cute, like we have these lumpfish and they're like puppy dogs. If you go back behind the scenes and you crack the lid open, they come up and say hi like a dog would asking for a treat, and so they have personality, they have uniqueness and individuality. And I think showing people that, people come away and they have a better understanding of the deep sea and they have a little bit more appreciation for it and probably, a little bit more desire to learn more and to protect that space. So when they hear about deep sea mining or something like that, they might be more likely to sign a petition or vote a certain way or something like that.
I think there may be more to it than that, though. It's also about piercing the bubble of human exceptionalism and being able to conceptualize that there are other lives and other experiences and other ways of interpreting the world, and that field of experience is much larger than the whole spectrum of human experience. And if you understand that, you can understand yourself as more rooted in a broader reality.
I would agree 100%. Yeah. I mean, they have their own whole world going on, which we're far removed from, and yeah, I would agree. Gives you that perspective that we're just a part of it, not the focus. Oh, I'm sorry, you're muted right now, Eleanor.
Despair, because when you understand the spectrum of experiences that exist outside of human experience, the issues that we face don't seem quite so huge and insurmountable.
Yeah, I would agree.
There is a concept in a book that I'm reading, or have finished reading recently, Christine Webb's The Arrogant Ape. And something that she really stresses in the wrap-up of the book is the significance of awe and of humility. Like, awe can be terrifying, but it's also frightening precisely because it means conceptualizing a larger reality that you are part of and that interacts with you and acts on you.
Nice.
I got to explore some of these themes recently. We had a exhibit from they sound a bit bombastic, but Marshmallow Laser Feast. They're a UK-based art collective, and they like to make the unseen visible, and they do lots of things like done an interactive piece called Through the Eyes of the Animal and things like that. They're really into perception, and I'm hoping to work with them on some deep sea stuff going forward. But yeah, they are very very attuned to these concepts and trying to help people understand these concepts. And that was essentially what I'm trying to do with the talk as well. It's like you've got to remember how they experience their lives and how they're not what we even see of them now. So it's totally scientific. If we have a single point origin of life, if we think that life came from a single point, then every living thing on this planet is a member of our family and we are directly connected with. And you can be proud of your far distant relative, the cheetah, for how fast it can run. And we're all in this together. And also that the planet is a collaborative work of art that we have created. Like the atmosphere is a collaborative effort of every living thing to create this. Like the earth wasn't perfect for life. Life changed the earth to its own degree. And sometimes it's had backfired. When oxygen first started appearing, it was toxic. It killed most things. And that's what Brian's finding as well. We're like, oh, oxygen's really important. It's like, no, it can kill you. And it's important to realize that things that you need can kill other things, and everything is sort of within this really intricate web. So I've really enjoyed exploring these things, and it really aligns with the New Zealand perspective as well. The Mataranga Maori has this idea of all living things as a family. Their creation story is a mother and father, sky and earth, and the children that are born from that union. And I particularly like Punga, who is the sort of god of ugly things, which includes the deep sea. So he's the son of Tongarewa, and he includes all the ugly things. So I want to do a study on Punga and see what the god of ugly things sort of has to say. But yeah, and through that art show, we realized lots of people connected with their own culture. I always summed it up as we have a word for this. So these are concepts that independently people have sort of realized, and it's only fairly recently that we've put ourselves at the top of the pyramid and view ourselves this way. Most older cultures have this integration with nature, and this exceptionalism sort of came quite recently. And interestingly, like even the sort of early taxonomists and the sort of Darwinian approach had this idea of a hierarchy to the natural world and everything progressing to the apex, which was humanity. And that's not the case, and that's not where the science sits right now. Even things we call living fossils, if they're extant, they're still here. They've been around. It just means they got it really right. They didn't have to change. So it's really important and I enjoy to sort of approach my work and approach the natural world as getting to know my family, and that grounding and sort of integration you feel with that. But yeah, that's really important to me, and I'm on a bit of a journey with that following this recent art show.
The idea of the natural order, I think, really got popularized with Aristotle's Scala Naturae, or at least that's what I've read in multiple sources recently.
There's a good book called No Such Thing as a Fish, I think, which is about an early ichthyologist, and that gets into eugenics. Agassiz, there's a trawl named after him. It was a big deal, sort of in early deep sea research as well. Yeah, super eugenicist. But there were also people who thought that within understanding the structure of the world and putting it into order, they thought that the God was hiding messages in there. They thought there was information to be gained by understanding how these animals relate. They also saw things like parasitism and, say, the sea squirt. They saw that as a failure of character. They thought that if things got lazy or if they became parasitic, then they would regress and they would fall down this like moral pyramid that they created with sort of humans at the top. It's fascinating to see early taxonomy has a real overlay of sort of judgment. And then it branches off into like eugenics and like all these horrible little areas. So yeah, I think that I'm a real proponent of science, but I think it is worth remembering that it is practiced by imperfect beings. It is in practice by imperfect people who put, you know, that whole like facts don't care about your feelings thing. Like, but interpreting what that fact means is totally based on your own bias. And that's why it's important to get diversity in the room, because I'm only going to have straight white guy from a relatively privileged background ideas. And so we need a broad spectrum of people because the same fact can be interpreted in a lot of different ways. I've gone really off fish now, but yeah, that's
It also sounds that the exhibition needs to be a traveling exhibition because some of us cannot get to New Zealand as easily. Maybe
yeah,
the exhibition needs to come other places.
it is traveling. It is traveling. Check out MLF, so Marshmallow Laser Feast. I really liked working with them. I think it is going to the Middle East next. It is a touring exhibition. It started off in ACME, which is the Science of the Moving Image. Sorry, the Museum of the Moving Image in Australia. It's Melbourne, I think. Then it came to us the first time it toured outside the country. Now I think it's going on to the Middle East, but. Oh, it was so good. It was so good. I could have an whole other talk on that. Like we tricked people into doing meditations and things like that. It was really, really cool. It was a really cool exhibit. I'll share some like links to that. There's still, but like being in presence of like a 12-meter projection of an MRI of the human lung, and it's crazy. It was great.
While Thom was talking about the beginnings of categorizing animals and taxonomy, there's a really great book. I'm just going to put it in the chat. It's called Every Living Thing by Jason Roberts, and it's really about the beginning of Linnaeus and Buffon and how they were trying to categorize things, making this chain, with people at the top and all this kind of stuff. So it's really a fascinating book if you're a reader, or you could listen to it, but don't listen to it while you're trying to draw. Okay.
So we're nearing the end, you guys. So if you have some pressing questions, I would encourage everybody to get them out. But if not, I would like to pose a question to our speakers, since the theme is perceiving the deep sea in its own terms. I am curious to know what's the thing you would wish people would know about the deep sea on its own terms, maybe, and not having a biased interpretation, if that made sense.
I guess I'll go then. To remove the separateness. It does feel a long way away, and it does feel such a different environment, but every deep sea trench we've visited has had plastic bags and bottles and things like that in the bottom of it. These animals have microplastics in them. They have flame retardant chemicals and forever chemicals turning up in them and things like that. So just to have the same protectiveness and pride in the deep sea as you do your favorite local beach. And I think what everyone present here is trying to do is to allow people to get close to the deep sea and to feel like the deep sea is as close as their local favorite beach. And if you saw somebody litter on that beach, it's like, dude, pick it up. So that sort of sense of connection, that sense of pride, it is always othered. It is always monster of the week. Like, and here's a weird thing from the deep sea. It's like, no, as a member of your family, we've discovered something new. It does something we didn't know things did before. It's expanded our understanding of what animals can do. Little respect, please, to the new family member who's joined us. So yeah, breaking down that barrier, just another habitat, not a monster show. Pride, respect, love for. And I think art is the channel that can really deliver that.
Yeah, I could hop in. One thing that comes to mind for me is just how we're just sort of the tip of the iceberg in terms of our understanding and observation of the deep sea. That, we do have, beautiful like images and videos and things like that, but they're all essentially snapshots, from very limited points in time and in space. And it's so incredibly vast. Like in Bari, we do all of our work right out of Moss Landing. We're fortunate to have the submarine canyon offshore of Monterey. But the deep sea just goes on and on and on. And so we're just it's a frontier, in terms of an environment to explore and to understand. And because of that, we want to promote that and allow time for that exploration before we use it as a resource, and destroy or alter habitats that we haven't even explored yet. So
I have something to say. I'm struggling to figure out how to say it because the word that just keeps coming to my lips is wonder. And I just wish I could share the depth of my wonder and amazement that I feel for this environment. And that's what I would love other people to feel. I don't even know if I want them to know it. I maybe want them to just know that it's out there for them and that they can search it out and experience that wonder. I think so. Our collective just did a 12-day science outreach program in Spokane, and we did 13 field trips and we did 6 talks. And one of the things I really, really enjoyed telling the kids was that the deep sea belongs to them, right? It's our shared global heritage. It belongs to everyone, all of us. And they just sort of were like, wait, what? Like, but I'm a kid. I don't own things. Like I have a bike. Okay, but the deep sea is like a big damn thing, and it's kind of an adult thing, and like, why would I own part of this? And it sort of takes them aback, and then they sit there, and I say, yeah. I said, so what do we do with our stuff? Like, what do we do with our stuff? Do we wreck our stuff? And they say, no. So what do we do with it? We take care of it, right? That's what I want them to know. I want all the kids to know and all the people to know that we don't wreck our stuff. And it's just very simple. It's basically what Thom said in like a really more beautiful, eloquent podcaster kind of way. But like, we just don't break our stuff. Okay, guys? That's where we're at.
Thank you, guys. Thank you so much for joining us in this final Reef Chat session. Thank you so much for Dr. Thom Linley, Meghan Jones, Brian Moore. As always, remember, you want to learn more about the deep sea, there is a Sustainable Ocean Alliance Deep Sea Academy. The recording will be out in a couple of weeks. So if you want to rewatch or miss some links, we will make sure those links are in there for you as well. If your friends missed the chat, tell them, you get to watch them again and watch these cool people talk about really cool things. Thank you, everybody, for being with us here today from
Thank you.
wherever you're joining us in the
Thank you.
world. Good night, good morning, good evening, from wherever you join us. Have a wonderful day, you guys.
Take care.
Thank you.
Everybody.
Actually, just as a last drop, Meghan and the Unseen Ocean Collective will be guests on the next episode of the podcast. So we'll have a very arty one, which might be out tomorrow. Meghan, I'm so tired. I'm so tired of editing. But yeah,
all my stuff's ready.
It sounds
So that
wonderful.
reminds me. Visit the deep sea exhibit at the Monterey Aquarium. Go check out Megan's work and her book for small children. It's amazing. I have it on pre-order. And don't sleep on the Deep Sea podcast. You will not regret it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you
Bye,
all.
guys.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye,
Have a great
everybody.
day, everyone.